Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm talking about another episode from season 6. This is episode 10, The Flight, where Jim Bob comes across a young boy who's planning to join the Air Corp. This episode was written by Carol and Mike Raschella and directed by Ralph Waite. Elizabeth is eagerly awaiting the arrival of Myrtle's young baby goat. Evidently, which I didn't know, goats have about a 5-month pregnancy. So she is hoping that this will happen soon. Jim Bob has acquired a hood ornament of an eagle for his car, and family members don't seem to be able to identify what this is. But while in Rockfish, there's a young boy, actually he's about 17, who does recognize what it is and admires Jim Bob's car. Now, there's someone who is looking for this young man, and so Joe, seeing that someone's chasing him, basically asks Jim Bob for a ride to get away from the area. Jim Bob's car overheats, and a cute scene where they open up the sides of the engine and are sort of fanning the engine to try and get it to cool down. Joe shares with Jim Bob that he is headed, I can't remember where, he's headed someplace to join the Air Corp. So of course Jim Bob strikes up quite a friendship with him over their shared love of the idea of flying. Cute scene here where I am giving John Curtis a bath in a tub in the kitchen sink. Now, because we didn't actually have running water in that sink on a regular basis, and because the sink was probably not all that sanitary, clearly they created this inside the sink tub where they would have been able to warm the water to a comfortable temperature and also make sure that the tub itself was sanitary. But, always fun and challenging to be washing infants because they are squirmy, as I recall from my own son, but really cute. And then Sarah Bridges, actress Lynn Carlin, returns in this episode as Epps' wife, and she is spending time with Olivia. Olivia is teaching her how to sew. A lot of the hallmarks of Ralph's directing style are on full display in this episode. There's a very lively dinner scene where I'm sure Ralph wanted all of us to just be talking and laughing and carrying on, so that it seemed like real family life, and quite the great-looking ham that he was carving for dinner and food being passed around. And Joe has been invited for dinner. A subsequent scene that I also felt had Ralph's hand all over it was a sort of a play chase, water fight between Joe and Jim Bob, where they're throwing water at each other, splashing, chasing each other around, and ultimately John comes over and sort of gets the two boys back to work doing things, and then has the final say by throwing a bucket of water on them. They have agreed that Joe can stay for a couple days, and John is a little suspicious because he keeps asking him when he needs to arrive to join the Air Corps. Supposedly his parents have signed a permission slip, but he said, oh, just whenever I arrive. John has his suspicions about this. He also said that he has no additional clothes with him. So having just completed this sequence where they're running around and Joe's been lying under the car and getting dirty, and now he and Jim Bob are sitting having a conversation, and Joe seems to be very clean. So I don't know whether we're assuming he borrowed clothes from Jim Bob, or Olivia washed and dried his clothes while he, I don't know, was wrapped in a blanket or something. But I have a feeling that it was probably one of those things that just slid by, and these could be his same clothes, but a secondary version of them that were clean. Joe has asked Jim Bob if he knows of a woman, Mrs. Sweeney, who he said his mom mentioned, and Jim Bob tells him that she runs a foster home someplace nearby. So Joe he runs away from Jim Bob at one point and goes to this foster home, where we find out his little sister Claire, is staying. And he tells Claire that his plan is to come and get her, and they're going to run away to Florida. So now we know that Joe is indeed a runaway, and that he is not planning to go join the Air Corps, but is hoping to reunite with his sister. Myrtle has a history of running away. She used to run away from Maud's and go to the Walton house. Now she has gotten away, and Elizabeth finds her at Maud's place back in the barn there. And Maud says she's just going to keep Myrtle for a while. We do come across Maud once again painting, so this was an ongoing storyline for her. We have continuing sense of real life with Joe and Jim Bob are building an airplane kite, and Olivia is continuing to teach Sarah to sew. The boys come in. They want to go see the movie Test Pilot in Rockfish, and Sarah says she saw it and it was terrific, and Jim Bob asks if they can go, doesn't have any money, and Sarah gives them money to go see the movie, says she really wants to do that. We once again have a scene in a movie theater. So whether this was done the same way that Debbie Gunn talked about, where they were basically in sort of a closet and with lights flashing, but my sense from what I've heard of people who did these scenes in movie sequences, they're shot separately, where at the time that you can see the screen isn't necessarily what the actors are seeing at the time when we see the close-ups of them. So always interesting how those scenes are edited together. But the man who is looking for Joe happens to come in and sit behind him and Jim Bob. So they take off out of the movie theater, and then there's a fun sequence of kind of hide and seek through town as he's trying to find them, and Joe is running Jim Bob around from place to place and hiding and stuff. And there's you just kind of keep missing. The man turns one way and we see the boys run behind him, and so just a clever little sequence that Ralph put together here. Finally, Joe confesses to Jim Bob that he did run away. Their parents died, and at first they were put someplace together, but then they were separated because they felt that Claire should have, she was young enough that she should have a family situation. So Joe has run away, and he is hoping to reunite with his sister, and that he is not joining the Air Corp. And he wants Jim Bob to run away with him. And Jim Bob considers this, but he's not totally sold on the idea. At one point in visiting Maud, Maud has said that Elizabeth can always stay there if she wants to be with Myrtle. Elizabeth would like to take Myrtle home, but Maud wants to keep her for a while. And they're eating gingerbread, and Maud is sharing stories. Early in the episode, Elizabeth talked with Grandpa about how she would always have a special time with Grandma early in the day when chores were done and there was a little bit of a break, and Grandma would tell her stories. And so in this case, Maud is kind of doing the same thing. However, Maud said her stories will be different than Grandma's because Maud said she was a wild child. Keeping in the sort of family theme, we do see that Myrtle has her goat, which is just adorable, and they do end up coming back to the house. Myrtle basically wanted the goat there because she wanted Elizabeth to come visit her because she's lonely. John finds out that, he confirms that Joe is basically a runaway and confronts Jim Bob about that. Sarah has been talking to Epp because she really would like to have a family, and Epp feels like he's too old. He's had children. His children are grown now, and he's not really ready to go back through that again. So Sarah is kind of struggling with how to deal with that. So that's kind of a little situation for her with Epp. I love at Sarah and Epp's house how Epp is trying to deal with all the extra frilly things around the house. And at one point he gets on the phone and he's like trying to get pillows out from under him and stuff. Again, just that hand of Ralph's in how he directed, that he kept other aspects going on in the scenes beyond just what was there. So this whole, the decorating and Epp being uncomfortable with the changes in his house just showed a whole other layer while a regular scene was going on. And that I don't know that I always appreciated that craft at the time Ralph was directing, but now as I look back at these episodes, he really was quite adept at that, and it just added so much. Claire has disappeared from the foster home. Joe has her. At one point they're hiding in the barn, and John comes in and finds them. Jim Bob has basically told on Joe, feeling that in a way it was in Joe's best interest to not be a runaway with a little sister, but Joe feels very betrayed by Jim Bob because Jim Bob said he wouldn't tell. Sarah suggests to Epp that perhaps they keep Joe and Claire so they won't be separated, but Epp is not at all sure about this. He goes to John for advice, and so, John basically says, yep, you're right, your life will be different, and sort of leaves it in Epp's hands. Maud does confess that the reason why she wanted to keep Myrtle was because she was lonely and wanted Elizabeth to come by and visit her. So Elizabeth promises that she will still continue to come and visit with Maud. Epp and Sarah come by with Joe and Claire and say that they have worked out to have the children like on weekends to spend time with them, and knowing it's a little bit of maybe a trial situation, and ultimately we do find out that they did adopt the two children, and so Joe and Claire have a new home and they get to stay near the Waltons. John does insist that Joe and Jim Bob make up their differences, so he sends them off to talk, and I think in general a happy ending all around. Once again, a wonderful collection of guest actors in this episode, including Marie Earle as Maud, John Crawford as Epp Bridges, Lynn Carlin back as Sarah Bridges. Then Jerry Cruz played Ed Larkin. Dan Priest played Harrison Bixby. Michelle Stacy was the little girl who played Claire. And Peter Miner played Joe. Thank you for joining me for this segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. If you are enjoying these segments, please do hit like and subscribe. I will see you next time for more Behind the Scenes of the Waltons, more Ask Judy, and more special guests. Thanks for watching.